Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together so that we can immerse ourselves in a beautiful, rich, written text that's been handed down for thousands of years, and also the beautiful text of the faces of those who are before us, which also bears great wisdom, each one. And we are designed to elicit from the written text and from the text of the individuals before us the rich body of wisdom and love that lies within. We are in Parshat Re'eh this week, which is in the book of Deuteronomy. It begins in chapter 11 with verse 26. And if you'd like to go off mute for a moment, we can recite our blessing, giving thanks for sharing in this moment together. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. And if you're not reading, I invite you to go on mute so we can eliminate feedback. Thank you. I will share with you the opening verses, and then I'll offer others an opportunity to read as well. We'll read through the entire English translation. Then I'll share with you a focus study about this week's portion, and then we'll open it up for our collective conversation. So again, Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 11, verse 26 is where we begin. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing, if you obey the commandments of Adonai your God that I enjoin upon you this day, and curse if you do not obey the commandments of Adonai your God, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day and follow other gods whom you have not experienced. When Adonai your God brings you into the land that you are about to enter and possess, you shall pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and the curse at Mount Ebal. Both are on the other side of the Jordan, beyond the west road that is in the land of the Canaanites, who dwell in the Arabah, near Gilgal by the terebinths of Moreh. For you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and possess the land that Adonai your God is assigning to you. When you have occupied it and are settled in it, take care to observe all the laws and rules that I have set before you this day. Richard, would you like to read a little bit at the very start of chapter 12?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. These are the laws and norms which you must carefully observe in the land that the Lord, God of your fathers, is giving you to possess as long as you live in that land. You must destroy all the sites at which the nations you are to dispossess worship their gods, whether on lofty mountains and on hills or under any luxuriant tree. Tear down their altars, smash their pillars, put their sacred posts to the fire, and cut down the images of their gods, obliterating their name from that site. Do not worship the Lord your God in like manner, but look only to the site that the Lord your God will choose amongst all your tribes as his habitation, to establish his name there. There you are to go, and there you are to bring your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions, your votive and freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks. Together with your household, you shall feast there before the Lord your God, happy in all the undertakings in which the Lord your God has blessed you.
Thank you, Richard. Sherry, you want to read starting at verse 8?
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall not act at all as we now act here, every man as he pleases, because you have not come to the allotted haven that the Lord your God is giving you. When you cross the Jordan and settle in the land that the Lord your God is allotting to you, and he grants you safety from all your enemies around you, and you live in security, then you must bring everything that I command you to the site where the Lord your God will choose to establish his name. Your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions, and all the choice votive offerings that you vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God with your sons and daughters, and with your male and female slaves, along with the Levite in your settlements, for he has no territorial allotment among you.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to read a little bit, starting at verse 13?
Okay, take care not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in any place you like, but only in the place that the Lord will choose in one of your tribal territories. There you shall sacrifice your burnt offerings, and there you shall observe all that I enjoy upon you. But whenever you desire, you may slaughter and eat meat in any of your settlements, according to the blessing that the Lord your God has granted you. The unclean and the clean alike may partake of it, as of the gazelle and the deer. But you must not partake of the blood. You should pour it on the ground like water.
Thank you, Steve. Anna, do you want to read a little bit, starting at verse 17?
Thank you. You may not partake in your settlements of the tithes of your new grain or wine or oil, or of the firstlings of your herds and flocks, or of any of the votive offerings that you vow, or of your freewill offerings, or of your contributions. These you must consume before your God in the place that your God will choose. You and your sons and daughters, your male and female slaves, and the family of the Levite in your settlements. Happy before your God in all your undertakings. Be sure not to neglect the family of the Levite as long as you live in the land.
Thank you. Jim, would you like to read, starting at verse 20?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Let me start with,
Okay,
at
Jim?
the top there with Jim. Yeah, Jim, and then I'll get to you, June. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. When Adonai enlarges your territory as he has promised you, and you say, I shall eat some meat, for you have the urge to eat meat, you may eat meat whenever you wish. If the place where Adonai has chosen to establish his name is too far from you, you may slaughter any of the cattle or sheep that Adonai gives you, as I have instructed you, and you may eat to your heart's content in your settlements. Eat it, however, as the gazelle and the deer are eaten. The unclean may eat together with the clean, but make sure that you do not partake of the blood, for the blood is the life, and you must not consume the life with the flesh. You must not partake of it. You must pour it out on the ground like water. You must not partake of it, in order that it may go well with you and your descendants to come, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of Adonai.
Thank you, Jim. And Karen, would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 26?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. But such sacred and votive donations as you may have shall be taken by you to the site that the Lord will choose. You shall offer your burnt offerings, both the flesh and the blood, on the altar of the Lord your God, and of your other sacrifices. The blood shall be poured out on the altar of the Lord your God, and you shall eat the flesh. Be careful to heed all these commandments that I enjoin upon you. Thus it will go well with you and with your descendants after you forever, for you will be doing what is good and right in the sight of the Lord your God. When the Lord your God has cut down before you the nations that you are about to enter and dispossess, and you have dispossessed them and settled in their land, beware of being lured into their ways after they have been wiped out before you. Do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did those nations worship their gods? I too will follow those practices. You shall not act thus towards the Lord your God, for they perform their God's very abhorrent act that the Lord detests. They even offer up their sons and daughters in fire to their gods.
Thank you very much, Karen. And Mark Thompson, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 13? And you'll need to go unmute.
Okay, let's try that again. Everything I command you that you shall be careful to do it, you shall neither add to it nor subtract from it. If there will arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder of which he spoke to you happens, and he says, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us worship them. You shall not heed the words of that prophet or that dreamer of a dream, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall follow the Lord your God, fear him, keep his commandments, heed his voice, worship him, and cleave to him. And that prophet or that dreamer of a dream shall be put to death because he spoke falsehood about the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to lead you astray from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to go. So shall you clear away the evil from your midst. If your brother, the son of your mother, tempts you in secret, or your son or your daughter, or the wife of your embrace, or your friend who is as your own soul, saying, let us go and worship other gods, which neither you nor your forefathers have known. Of the gods of the people around you, whether near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. You shall not desire him, and you shall not hearken to him, neither shall you pity him, have mercy upon him, nor shield him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with the stones that he dies, because he sought to lead you astray from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And all Israel shall listen in fear, and they shall no longer do any evil such as this in your midst.
Thank you so much. Let me invite
Okay.
Jimmy, if you'd like to continue there at verse 13.
Thank you, Rabbi. If you hear it said of one of the towns that the Lord your God is giving you to dwell in, that some scoundrels from among you have gone and subverted the inhabitants of their town, saying, come, let us worship other gods whom you have not experienced, you shall investigate and inquire and interrogate thoroughly. If it is true, the fact is established that abhorrent thing was perpetrated in your midst, put the inhabitants of that town to the sword, and put its cattle to the sword. Doom it and all that is in it to destruction. Gather all its spoil into the open square, and burn the town and all its spoil as a holocaust to the Lord your God. And it shall remain an everlasting ruin, never to be rebuilt. Let nothing that has been doomed stick to your hand, in order that the Lord may turn from his blazing anger and show you compassion, and in his compassion increase you, as he promised your fathers on oath. For you will be heeding the Lord your God, obeying all his commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, doing what is right in the sight of the Lord your God.
Thank you so much. David Phillips, would you like to start off there at the beginning of chapter 14?
I'm a little lost as to which verse. My translation is different. So what verse are we on?
We're on the beginning of chapter 14.
Oh, okay. You are children of Hashem your God. You shall not cut yourselves, and shall not make a bald place between your eyes for the dead. Because you are a holy people to Hashem your God, and Hashem has chosen you to become a treasured people to him out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. You shall not eat any offensive thing. This is the animal that you shall eat. Ox, lamb of sheep, lamb of goats, deer and gazelle and roebuck and wild goat and bison and antelope and mountain sheep, and every animal that has a hoof and that has a split of hooves in two, that regurgitates cud. Among animals you shall eat it, except you shall not eat this out of those that have regurgitate the cud and out of those that had a hoof, the camel and the rock badger and the hare, because they regurgitate cud and do not have a hoof. They are impure to you. And the pig, because it has a hoof but no cud, it is impure to you. You shall not eat from their meat, and you shall not touch their carcass. You shall eat this out of all that are in the water. You shall eat everyone that has fins and scales, and shall not eat anyone that does not have fins and scales. It's impure to you. And you shall eat any pure bird. And this is what you shall eat from them. The eagle. No, this is what you shall not eat from them. The eagle and the vulture and the black vulture and the kite and the falcon by its kind and every raven by its kind and the eagle owl and the nighthawk and the seagull and the hawk by its kind, the little owl and the great owl and the white owl and the pelican and the fishhawk and the cormorant and the stork and the heron by its kind and the hoopoe and the bat. And every swarming thing of flying creatures, it's impure to you, shall not be eaten. You shall eat every pure bird, and you shall not eat any carcass. You shall give it to the alien who is in your gates, and he will eat it or sell it to a foreigner. Because you are a holy people to Hashem, your God, you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Thank you, David. And Marty, would you like to read starting at verse 22?
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall set aside every year a tenth part of all the yield of your sowing that is brought from the field. You shall consume the tithes of your new grain and wine and oil, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks, in the presence of the Lord your God, in the place where he will choose to establish his name, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God forever. Should the distance be too great for you, should you be unable to transport them, because the place where the Lord your God has chosen to establish his name is far from you, and because the Lord your God has blessed you, you may convert them into money. Wrap up the money and take it with you to the place that the Lord your God has chosen, and spend the money on anything you want, cattle, sheep, wine, or other intoxicant, or anything you may desire. And you shall feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and rejoice with your household. But do not neglect the Levite in your community, for he has no hereditary portion as you have. Every third year you shall bring out the full tithe of your yield of that year, but leave it within your settlements. Then the Levite who has no hereditary portion as you have, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your settlements shall come and eat their fill, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the enterprises you undertake.
Thank you, Marty. Dave Lett, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 15?
Every seventh year you shall practice remission of debts. This shall be the nature of the remission. All creditors shall remit the due that they claim from their fellow Israelites. They shall not dun their fellow Israelites or kin, for the remission proclaimed is of Adonai. You may dun the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due you from your kin. There shall be no needy among you, since your God Adonai will bless you in the land that your God Adonai is giving you as a hereditary portion, if only you heed your God Adonai and take care to keep all this instruction that I enjoin upon you this day. For your God Adonai will bless you as promised. You will extend loans to many nations, but require none yourself. You will dominate many nations, but they will not dominate you. If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin in any of your settlements in the land that your God Adonai is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin. Rather, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet that need. Beware lest you harbor the base thought. The 7th year, the year of remission, is approaching, so that you are mean and give nothing to your needy kin who will cry out to Adonai against you, and you will incur guilt. Give readily and have no regrets when you do so, for in return your God Adonai will bless you in all your efforts and in all your undertakings. For there will never cease to be needy ones in the land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land.
Thank you so much, Dave. Jay, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 12?
Thank you, Rabbi. If a fellow Hebrew, man or woman, is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. When you set him free, do not let him go empty-handed.
Jay, we're having a little bit of problem with your audio. So I'm going to ask if you can go on mute for a bit, Jay, and then we'll get back to you. Okay, thank you. Let me just finish that portion. Furnish him out of the flock, threshing floor and vat, with which your God has blessed you. Bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt,
and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I enjoin this commandment upon you today. But should he say to you, I do.
And Justin, would you like to begin reading at verse 16?
Thanks, Rabbi. Sorry, I'm just finding it.
Okay.
What chapter verse, please?
You okay, Justin?
I am. I just need the verse, my window.
So we're
with
in
that.
chapter 15, verse 16.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it will be, if he says to you, I will not leave you, because he loves you and your household, for it is good for him with you. Then you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall be your servant to you forever. And also to your maidservant, you shall do likewise. You shall not be troubled when you send him free from you, for twice as much as a hired servant he has served you 6 years, and the Lord your God will bless you in all that you shall do. Every firstborn male that is born of your cattle or of your flock you shall sanctify to the Lord your God. You shall neither work with the firstborn of your ox, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You shall eat it before the Lord your God year by year in the place the Lord chooses you and your household. And if there be any blemish on it, whether it is lame or blind or any ill blemish, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You shall eat it within your cities, the unclean and the clean together, as the deer and as the gazelle. However, you shall not eat its blood. You shall pour it on the ground as water.
Justin, thank you. Let me invite Robert, if you would like to start at the very beginning of chapter 16.
Yes, thank you. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God, of the flock and of the land, in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction, for thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life. And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coast 7 days, neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sacrificest. The first day at even remain all night until the morning. Thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, but at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in. There thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, and thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto thy tents. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein.
Thank you so much, Robert. Catherine, would you like to read starting at verse 9 of chapter 16?
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall count off 7 weeks, start to count the 7 weeks when the sickle is first put to the standing. Then you shall observe the Feast of Weeks for the Lord your God, offering your free will contribution according as Adonai your God has blessed you. You shall rejoice before Adonai your God with your son and daughter, your male and female slave, the Levite in your communities, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your midst, at the place where Adonai your God will choose to establish his name. Bear in mind that you were slaves in Egypt, and take care to obey these laws. After the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat, you shall hold the feast of booths for 7 days. You shall rejoice in your festival, and your son and daughter, your male and female slave, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your communities. You shall hold festival for Adonai your God 7 days in the place that Adonai the God will choose. For Adonai your God will bless all your crops and all your undertakings, and you shall have nothing but joy. 3 times a year, on the feast of unleavened bread, on the feast of weeks, and on the feast of booths, all your males shall appear before Adonai your God in the place that he will choose. They shall not appear before Adonai empty-handed, but each with his own gift, according to the blessing that Adonai your God has bestowed upon you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you a focused study about this week's portion. Then we'll open it up for our collaborative conversation about it. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out now. And this week, when I was studying our portion, oftentimes I get at least a few words into the portion before something grabs my attention. This week, I got one word into the portion, and I was stunned. And this is what provoked me. Because if you go back to the beginning of our Torah portion of chapter 11, verse 26, in the Hebrew, it begins this way. Ro'eh anochi noten lifnechem chayom bracha u'klala. See. And then it says, Adonai, I give you blessings and curse. And I thought to myself, why does it start with the word see? It could have just started out with the second word, Anochi noten lifnehem, I give before you. Is there something that we're supposed to visualize? Is this supposed to be some visual experience of some kind? And if so, what is the visual experience that I'm supposed to see? And so that's what caught my attention. That's what grabbed me. And that's what I decided to explore a little bit. So on our study sheet, I have here one of the clear instructions that the Israelites are supposed to do when they enter into the promised land, when they cross over, if you will. I think this is a better way to put it. When they cross over from their wandering, from their being out in the wilderness and enter into the land where they are to settle, they are to tear down their altars, smash their pillars, put their sacred posts to the fire, and cut down the images of their gods. There is something that is so primary about leaving behind the wilderness and then settling into the promised land, about destroying idolatry, which on the one hand, idolatry represents physical objects that people have made to represent forces which are then worshiped. But what the Jewish Bible really presents to us as idolatry is a form of projection of self that is designed to be able to be the real subject of worship, which is the capacity of oneself to create powers. And that's what's being worshiped, rather than something that cannot be contained, something that cannot be even imagined in its fullness. So this is a primary instruction: when to settle in the promised land, build homes, begin businesses, begin to grow things, manage one's herds, that one is not to become enthralled with one's own power and begin to worship it. The second clear instruction that we have some great detail about is here in number 3. You shall tithe every year all the seed crop that the field gives forth. Primary about entering into the promised land and developing all this wealth is that everyone is to take a portion of that wealth and dedicate it to someone other than oneself. And there are actually 3 different types of tithes that occurred during different years within the course of a 6-year period. We have a tithe that is meant for the Levites who don't own land, and so they don't have the capacity to grow their own food. The second tithe is one that's to be brought to Jerusalem at the end of the year, and the one who brings it, the owner of that tithe, is to consume it there in Jerusalem. And this is interesting because coming into Jerusalem, which is where the ultimate settlement will be as its focus, brings one in contact with people from different parts of the land of Israel, and one encounters there people who are dedicated first to the worship around the temple, and then when the temple is destroyed, it brings them into contact with people who are engaged in study. And then the third tithe is the tithe for the poor, for those who are in need. So, and then after going through these in various sequences over a period of 6 years, we get to the 7th year, when you are to, in a sense, give up everything. You're not even supposed to plant or to harvest the land itself. You're just supposed to let it go. So this notion about going into the promised land and having these primary instructions being, don't worship that which you have the capacity to build and control, and make sure that which you do have some degree of control over, you give over to others. These are the primary instructions. We have in the Talmud an interesting playfulness with the wonderful rich ambiguities that Hebrew presents. So we have here in our Torah portion in chapter 14, verse 22, aser te'aser et kol tevunat, to tithe all of your seed-growing plants. So we have here the same verb, aser to aser. And so some of our rabbis are going to playfully wonder, well, why do we have the same word repeated? And if you turn over, you'll see that Rabbi Yochanan is going to play with this wonderful rich ambiguity of the fact that the same three letters that spell out the word to tithe, the same three letters with a slightly different vocalization also mean to become rich. And so on the backside, we have this in the Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan said, why is a double verb form used in Deuteronomy 14:22? Well, it means to teach us tithe in order that you may become rich. So he's telling us to give up that which we have control over, which we have produced, which we possess, which we have dominion over. To give that up really provides us a greater wealth than we first perhaps imagined. Here is, I want to share with you the painting that's on the front. It's a painting is by a Mexican artist, Lelo Gutierrez. And we are dealing with in our text the Israelites who are on the border. They're about to cross over from one world into the next, from one territory into the next, and they're getting these instructions about how to really not only survive, but how to make the most of the land that you're going to be moving into, the dimension that you're going to be moving into. Lalo Gutierrez was born literally about as embedded in the border between the United States and Mexico as one could be, because he was born in the camp of the construction site for what became the Falcon Dam. The Falcon Dam is located between Falcon Heights, Texas, in the United States, and Nueva Ciudad Guerrero in Mexico. So he's born in this camp where they're about to build something that's going to connect these two nations, something that will create a dam, that will provide water, that will provide power. It will be a recreation site. It will control flooding. It will irrigate crops. And it is just that this river that this dam is being built on has two names, depending upon whether you're living in the United States or Mexico. In the United States, this river is called the Rio Grande. In Mexico, it's called the Rio Bravo. Now, Gutierrez is an interesting figure because unlike many of the other artists that we have looked at, Gutierrez didn't attend any art school. He just started painting and drawing since he was 5 years old, beginning in that construction camp for the Falcon Dam. And his art is all quite abstract and expresses his spirituality and the love that he has at his core. So here we have this painting called Now You Are the Light of the World and Salt of the Earth. And that title is from a verse from the Gospel of Matthew. You are the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And in that Gospel of Matthew, it's speaking of the power to be a source of radiance and nurturance in the world. And indeed, Pope Francis chose those words for his homily at the World Youth Day in 2002. in which Pope Francis said, salt is something that's not to be kept. It's to be shared on many different levels. It's to be used to give flavor to the lives of others. Here, I want to say that what is happening in our Torah portion is a reminder that to shift over from being in the wilderness to being in the promised land, to shift from being in a place of wildness, barrenness, to then being in the land of milk and honey where everything is rich and fruitful. It is important that we don't become absorbed in our own arrogant capacity to build and grow, and that we constantly be able to empty ourselves and to share with others. So here's from the prophet Isaiah, who is reminding people what it takes to create a world in which we can all thrive. Share your bread with the hungry, bring home the moaning poor. When you see a naked one, clothe him, and do not hide from your flesh. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn, and your healing spring up quickly. Your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of God will be your ingatherer. Then, when you call, God will answer. When you cry, God will say, Hineni, here I am. If you banish lawlessness from your midst, the menacing hand and evil speech, and you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the famished being, then shall your light shine in darkness, and your darkness shall be like noon. Lalo Gutierrez has painted this expression of his own spirituality based upon a text from his spiritual tradition, which indicates that at some point, there is no longer a light outside of us, there is a light inside of us. That, I think, is what is being hinted at in our Torah portion, and that is what Prophet Isaiah is saying more expressly, that when we share with others, the light within us begins to shine. The Israelites are at this point of crossing over. Up to this point, light from outside of them has led the way. But in the promised land, when they establish a sense of sovereignty, both as a nation and as human beings, the light needs to come from within. So with that, I'd love to know what you saw in this week's Torah portion and what you encountered along the way. If you raise your hand, I'd love to call upon you. Jerry.
I just have a question about the text. The 3 times we heard that the blood is to go out onto the earth. Why is it spilled out onto the earth? I can understand not wanting to, that we're not supposed to eat it, but what is it about spilling blood on the earth? Why is that?
Where else would it go?
I mean, it could be thrown out, it could be, not consumed, but why does it says specifically that it's supposed to go into the earth? The blood is spilled out of the animals, so just wondered what that was about.
Well, what would be a more respectful way to treat this this carrier of life? To just discard it, or to let it blend back into the earth, which is a source of such nourishment and livelihood.
Sort of a composting sort of thing is what you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a kind of recycling. Yeah.
The earth absorbs, right? Not all of it does, but in general, when you pour water on the earth, it goes into it. So it's a way of recycling it, but also to keep it from causing contagion or smell or whatever. It's a rather clean way to do it.
Acts as a filter as well. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. And others, Margot.
To me, Rabbi, the first 2 paragraphs of tonight's reading is amongst the most dramatic that I have ever read. I can picture myself standing as a woman in the midst of this horde of people and thinking, what is the curse going to be? What is the blessing going to be? We, anxious to know what it is. And then when it says that I'm about to cross the Jordan, I feel there should be trumpets playing. After all these years, I'm finally going to cross the Jordan. I love these first two paragraphs.
I love your enthusiasm, Margaret. Thank you so much. I'm picturing you among the Israelites crossing over, and I'm picturing you displaying all that enthusiasm, and you are exponentially increasing everyone else's enthusiasm.
I think it should be read with great excitement. These two paragraphs.
Thank you. Let me call upon Robert.
So Margot's comment was irresistible. One of the illusions, I believe, of life is arrival. We're always becoming. We're always in movement. Arrival is just one more step on a mountain. If we ever think we arrive, that means, I believe, of a static condition. Life moves ahead. If we're static, we fall behind. A couple other things I want to say. I have found, especially last week and this week, the text you sent out to be highly impressive. And I just, as a personal note, it would be delightful if you would compile these in a book and share with us. I mean, we all have copies, but to put them in a book, I think there's so much there that is relevant for a person of any faith or no faith. And the other thing is, the more I read the Torah, the more I view it as I would view any valid religion. And that is, it contains everything. It contains reciprocity. In the same way the apple falls from the tree to nourish the ground, the blood of the animal goes to the earth, plus everything else that has been said. And then the concept of questions. With regard, one of the eternal questions is there a God? How many gods are there? And the answer, of course, is there's only one God. And by the way, don't have any graven images, which we find all around the world. So it's interesting how in the Torah you find statements to do with health, with agriculture, in other words, making a living, with charitable giving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been with you now for a year, and I really see a complete statement, a complete book that a person can use. Now, obviously, I use a different book, but how much I honor this one, and you knew this from the time I started, such great honoring of this book, and I've really gotten to know it well, at least better. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And I just want to say that to the extent each one of us is also a book, we have gotten to read you as well. And that's been a great reward for all of us. So thank you very much. Okay. And others, Richard?
I like the phrase, do not hide from your flesh. Because to me, it's the same as treat your neighbor as yourself. We're all one flesh. We're all made from the earth, and that's why the blood goes back into the earth, because that's where our life comes from. And I was wondering about this phrase that repeats itself. I didn't have it here, about do not worship gods that you have not experienced.
Right.
So, and God is saying that. Is God giving voice to the notion that there are other gods, and what does that mean? And did we experience them? Well, maybe that's exactly what he's saying, reminding us not just that we were led out of Egypt through the mighty hand, but that we heard his voice we actually experience this. Don't forget that. Hold on to that experience, because experience is what's going to help you understand and internalize the rules, the norms, the commandments, whatever you want to call them, the fairness, the ethics between one another and between your and even between your enemies, amongst your enemies. And the last thing I want to say is that Esau remains thirsty.
That Esau remains thirsty. Thank you, Richard. And let me call upon Martin Hughes. Yes, please share with us.
Well, I had a kind of a unique question that kind of popped into my head. What is the difference and what is the similarities between soul energy and electricity?
And tell us why that enters into your head. What is it that intrigues you about that? What are you trying to pursue?
Well, when you said that all life is connected, well, it is all connected. One of the ways we are all connected intergalactically is electricity. So I was kind of wondering what the Jewish teachings say about soul energy and electricity.
You know, what comes to my mind when you raise that question is the notion that energy is never destroyed. It merely takes on different forms. And so whether one wants to apply that in terms of all of creation, and that is just a transference of energy from one form to another, if you want to think about life and death that way, but to think about the notion that energy is never destroyed. You know, sometimes at a funeral we'll say, that which is beautiful is never destroyed. And it's meant to convey a sense of comfort and solace to people who have now lost the physical body that was their companion or member of their family for so long. But if one can really absorb that lesson, that the energy that body was a host to is not destroyed. It just evolves into a different form of some kind. So thank you very much. That's what I think of when you raise the question about energy and electricity and so forth. Let me just ask Mark Thompson, would you like to offer something? You're nodding your head, so I'm just kind of.
I'm nodding my head because your words gave me a lot of comfort. You know, I'm thinking about my cousin and the fact that, you know, this was a person who had a great deal of energy and vibrancy in his life that it was transmitted to everybody, and it's still there. It's still there in our memories, and the people that we love, these memories remain with us and they remain alive for us. So I'm thankful for the question, and I'm very thankful for your answer.
Thank you. And we're grateful that not only was Robert Saslow a blessing in your life, but the fact that you are honoring him this way is a great blessing in the world. So
thank you.
Thank you. And I going back to Margot's initial comment about blessings and curses, I'd like to kind of wrap this together by saying this is that we're at this point of transition in our Torah story, that there is this shift from the dimension of being in the wilderness where they were being led by God along the way. They were instructed by different manifestations of God when to settle down and camp, and when to break camp and begin to move forward. But the presence of God was always there leading the way. And it was a fire, if you will, that was leading the way. It was a fire that appeared to Moses. It was a fire of lightning and so forth that appeared before all of Israel at Mount Sinai. And the message here seems to be, I've led you this far. If you're going to be a sovereign people, not just a nation state in the way we think of it in terms of geopolitical senses, But if you are going to be sovereign human beings who have control over yourselves and your desires and your urges, and therefore will be a constructive force in the world, then I am no longer going to be the light outside of you leading the way. It's going to be the light within you that will lead the way. And when that light comes through, I'll always respond when you call upon me. I'll say, Hineni, I'm here with you, because you are bringing forth the light within you. How are you doing that? Isaiah tells us, by sharing bread with the hungry, by bringing home the poor, by clothing the naked. Then your light bursts through like dawn, and your healing springs up quickly. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being great lights. We know that the world needs great lights. It needs great light to come forth from within. And we do that by reaching out to one another, sharing our bread, taking care of the poor, and knowing that we are all one. God bless you all. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
You. Good night.